All right, Akim, Shalom, Shalom. First and foremost, I give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim Lakakadash, that honors to the apostles and elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth. And salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquath that may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I'm just going to be going through this word. As you see on the screen, it says miracles. So what that is, and I'm going to share a little bit of a testimony. And as always, Yahweh Rataza, Yahweh willing, this lesson may be edifying. So I'm just going to go to the etymology. Before I go to the scriptures, I'm going to go to the etymology just to get an understanding of what is a miracle. So, okay, so it says miracle, a wondrous work of God. It says miracle, story of a miracle, miracle play, object of wonder, marvelous event caused by the Most High, to wonder at, marvel, be astonished, to regard, esteem, wonderful, astonishing, amazing. It says to smile, laugh, to smile. So we kind of get the point here. It's a wondrous work that is essentially beyond our comprehension and our of I guess reasoning, for us being mortal reasoning, right? Something that's just beyond, our understanding, right? Something that is working in the hands of the Most High, right? Because, Yahweh just means he exists, right? So, what really inspired this lesson was, I was chopping up and spending some time with a brother. And essentially, to make a long story short, we had, parked up in a parking space, and we went away from the car. We were just chilling, doing our thing, and essentially we left the car with the keys in the car for I think it was about 3.5 hours or so. So we were gone for a long time, and then about 3 hours, realizing, man, I didn't have my keys. So going back, we realized, it's okay. Let's head back, right? And we head back to the parking space. For some reason, the van was still there, and the keys were in the back. So it completely escaped my knowledge, right? And we were just thinking to ourselves, we were just kind of in our spirits praising Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, because there is, especially in the city of Toronto, there's a lot of theft, like car theft, especially for cars that are more on the luxury side. And essentially we're just praising the Lord because we just thought of this is a completely miraculous event, right? Because with all this turmoil and perilous times that that we're going through right now, and even times to come, is like, I thought, my goodness, this is an example of a miracle, right? So anyways, I guess I want to kind of touch on a couple of things, mostly in regards to the miracles, right? Because in these times to come, we will be in situations where, like, oh my goodness, we don't really fully see and understand how we're going to get out of this, but the Lord is going to do something, because the Lord is far out, right? So I just want to bring out a couple of examples of that. So what I want to start off first is I want to start off in Luke, right? So this is Luke chapter 4, verse 1. And I want to touch on something Yahushua said. So this is Luke 4 and 1. I'm reading NLT, and it says, "In Yahushua, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan River. He was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where he was tempted of the devil for 40 days. Yahushua ate nothing at all. At at, at that time and became very hungry. Then the devil said to him, "If you are the Son of the Most High, tell this stone to become a loaf of bread." And here's the point I really wanted to touch on. It says, "But Yahushua told him, no, these scriptures say people do not live by bread alone." I read it in the KJV, and it says this: Yahushua answered him, saying, "It is written that man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the Most High Yahweh." Right. So, and one of the reasons I wanted to read this because our people, get an understanding that it's essentially money and substance and all these things of this world, for example, all these carnal things, is really what encapsulates your well-being or your position in life, right? And and our people don't have guidance, right? And this is what we go through the scriptures for, because that bread, that bread, like, essentially, and Jake says this in the world too, I'm trying to accumulate my bread, and they're mostly talking about money. They're talking about carnal and substances, right? Not knocking money, because the scripture saying money is a defense, right? But I'm kind of more harping on the fact that the words of the Most High, through these scriptures is how we get understanding. Through thy precepts, we get understanding of how to essentially conduct ourselves, in these times, right? So, let's move on. So, excuse me. Okay, this is Hebrews 11:1, and it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen." Right? And this is what I know essentially what faith, is, because we don't really essentially see what the Most High Yahweh Bashem Yahshua is going to do, in these times. We just know, like it says in Isaiah, how, for example, my servants shall eat, right? And we don't know what kind of form that will take, because essentially when Esau comes down with that great wrath, because he has a short time, the society, what's going to happen is he's going to make it in a way where, okay, it's going to be extremely difficult to access essential needs like food and groceries and water and all these different things that we need to survive, right? And we don't really know what the Lord will kind of do, but it would essentially, in those times, what the Lord will do is work, going back to the title of the lesson, these miracles and these different avenues, right? Like, we don't know how he will do it, right? Because the Lord is far out, right? And I want to give an example of that too, in the scriptures, right? And this is something to keep in mind as society continues to decline, right? And actually get an understanding, like, oh my goodness, like, even though in the flesh sometimes we feel kind of like nervous about, okay, what will happen, we honestly have to refer back to the scriptures in terms of looking at the ways of our forefathers and remembering the things and the acts of old that the Lord did, right? And keeping those things in the back of our minds, right? How are we going to get it through and get out of these situations, right? So another one example I wanted to touch on, let's go to Kings. This essentially was a miracle. This is one of the examples of a miracle that came into my mind as I was reflecting after this situation unfolded. This is 1 Kings 17. As a matter of fact, hold on. Before I read this account, because I mentioned the as society declines, right? Let me just get this first precept. Okay, this is Amos 8 and 11, and it says, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord power, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, or nor a thirst for water, but from hearing the words of the Lord." So there'll be a time where you don't, Jake would not be able to access and hear, these words that are coming out, through our apostles and elders, and that are constantly speaking this word, not even essentially every day, right? Every week, they're, physically out, some camps go up maybe twice a week or 3 times a week, but, they're going to be, there's essentially going to be a drought, and this is a spiritual drought. Because already, Jake is already in a wilderness, right? And Jake is not going to be able to essentially access these words that are coming out, because there will be a time where the prophets are not going to be on the streets anymore. And a good example of that, I don't want to say a good example, but I guess a low level example we saw recently. There was that company name, I think it was called CrowdStrike, and then there was like a huge IT shutdown. And essentially, when you really think of it, there's a lot of our lives that is essentially completely dependent on technology, because we live in an information age where a lot of the jobs are completely reliant on technology. So in that time, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, there were flights that were canceled. There were banks that had delays in their deposits. Essentially, what that does, it creates a halt in the economy. It creates a block, so things would not be able to essentially run smoothly, right? Commerce stops, business stops, all these different facets of society that rely on technology, even including, for example, like us actually teaching this word, via the internet. All this is relying essentially on technology, so to speak. This is what I'm trying to get at, right? So there'll be a time where, even at like low levels right now, because now we have to speak in code. We can't say certain things. If you mention certain things, you're labeled as misinformation, and you need to be fact checked, or you get strikes on your account and all this nonsense. What happens is there is slowly coming down the pipe with that legislation. When you read in Revelation, it talks about 2 horns like a lamb and spake as a dragon, right? Coming down with that, essentially that those draconian measures where you wouldn't be able to speak, real truth in those times, right? So essentially, hearing the words of the Lord, you wouldn't be hearing, Jake wouldn't be able to hear this, right, at a certain point, right? So that's why it says in Isaiah, for example, seek the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, while he may be found, right? Because there will be a time where the Lord, would not be found through his men, the apostles and elders and the prophets, right? So, okay, let me go back to the account. So it's like I don't mean to delay. So this is 1 Kings 17 and 1. Okay, I'll read in the KJV, and it says, "And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab," so Ahab was one of the kings of the northern kingdom, right? And just give me 1 second. Right, Salakio. So, as I was saying, Ahab was he was one of the kings of the northern kingdom, right? And he began like going off, him and his wife Jezebel, right? So it says, "As the Lord power of Israel liveth, before whom I stand there, there shall not a dew nor rain these years according to my word." So essentially, there was a drought in the land, right? Verse 2, and it says, "And the word of the Lord came unto him saying, Get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. Verse 4. It shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook. So just for edification, a brook is kind of like a small river. It says, and I commanded the ravens to feed thee there. Right? And verse 5, and it says, now he went and did according to the word of the Lord Yahweh. For he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and the bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Right? So essentially Elijah was in a position where, okay, you have a drought in the land, and he was able to be fed. The Lord essentially fed him with the using the ravens, right? And when you look into the I don't want to say this word science, but when you look into ravens are actually very, very smart animals, right? They're actually very, very smart birds. I've seen videos online of them like solving puzzles and using cars to smash nuts so they can get essentially like the nut itself. Sorry, they would smash a shell. So they wait for the car to pass by, and they would smash the shell, and they would try and get the nut out of the shell, kind of like a pistachio, right? And it's like, wow, that's very, very impressive, right? So this is just an example of one of those miracles I was using, because this is an actual physical, drought that Elijah was experiencing, right? And for us in this time, there will be, yes, a physical drought, so to speak, right? Because there was not going to be no longer access to certain things like in the grocery store unless you have that grain of rice. And there's also going to be, that spiritual drought, right? From hearing the words of the word of the Lord, right? Via his prophets, like I read in the precept earlier in Amos, right? So I'll read verse 6 again, and it says, and the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank from the brook, right? So this was one of the examples of that wondrous works that the Lord performed, in these particular situations, right? Let's get... Okay, this is 2 Ezra 2 and 27, and it says, be not weary, for when the day of trouble and heaviness cometh, others shall weep and be sorrowful, but thou shalt be merry and have abundance. The heathen shall envy thee, but they shall be able to do nothing against thee, saith the Lord. My hands shall cover thee, and so that thy children shall not see hell, right? So, there'll be a time, the flesh is, you'll feel some kind of way in the flesh, but, we look forward, I look forward to, seeing the other miracles the Lord is going to exemplify, in those days, right? And actually looking over us, hopefully we're those, servants that, the Lord would feed us with and have mercy upon, in these times, right? So, because when you think about the perilous times and you think about the Spirit's creative vengeance, and there's a lot of judgment, man, that's going to come upon a lot of these people, because essentially they're essentially kind of like emboldened in their sins, right? And there's going to be like just a lot of judgment that goes on, man, because a lot of these people in this society, if you're not sinning, essentially you ain't winning, right? So anyways, I guess I'll just wrap it up here. I didn't really want to make the lesson too long, but I thought I would just share that little testimony in hopes it would be edifying, comforting as well, for things to come, And also just, I guess, as a faith booster as well, right? I didn't really touch on this in this particular lesson, but I guess another thing to also take away from this short testimony is the wonderful thing to actually, like, if you're a brother and you're part of a camp, to actually be a part of a camp, because it's such a, like the scriptures say that a faithful friend is a strong defense, right? And to also be continued with a godly man, because in these times, man, even in these times, like right now as I'm speaking, you're not gonna have a lot of people out here that actually fear the Lord, right? Because what that produces is conduct and a relative sense of safety, right? A lot of these people are gonna have all their scruples, like Joker said in that book, that movie, The Dark Knight. Essentially all their scruples are gonna go out the window. These people will eat each other, literally, right? So, I guess I'll leave it there. But hopefully this video was edifying. I'd like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Shai. Until next time, say Shalom.